Alright, y'all, so we are starting on lesson 3.2, so make sure you are on that Google Doc. Alright, so we're going to be gathering evidence about inheritance. And so I told you last class that we are hopefully going to get rid of one of the claims today. And so by the end of today, you're going to be able to support or refute claim 2. So for our warm-up, I want you guys to go into your Google Doc. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to explain why you support or disagree with claim 2. Alright, y'all, so since we aren't doing a peer deck anymore, what we're going to do is just make sure you're answering questions in the chat. So for this question, you do not have to put your explanation, but I want to know if you agree or disagree with claim 2. So go ahead and put it in the chat whether you agree or disagree with claim 2. And we'll move on to our next activity. Alright, got a lot of disagrees. Kate said no, no, no. Alright, looks like we're all on the same page here. So hopefully by the end of this class, we're just going to be able to kind of scratch off claim 2, just get rid of it, and focus on the other 2 claims, okay? So for this next activity, we're eventually going to watch an Amoeba Sisters video, but first we're going to go over our investigation question and a key concept. Okay, so we know that genes provide instructions for making proteins, which determine the organism's traits. And so in that last lesson, we actually read an article to learn how organisms get those genes. Okay, so our investigation question from last class, how do you guys, based on what you know so far, how do organisms get their genes? All right, answer that in the chat. How do organisms actually get their genes? right? I mean, it says they inherit their genes from their parents, right? We don't just inherit them from some random people. There are 23 genes passed down from each parent, 46 in total. All right. So we know that we get our genes from our parents, right? So here's a key concept I want you guys to write down. We have two key concepts today. One will be at the end of class. And so we learned this in the last lesson when we read that article. And so we had two vocab words, inherit and sexual reproduction. And so this key concept kind of puts those together. So organisms inherit their genes through sexual reproduction. So this is just a smarter way, I guess, of saying that they get them from their parents. Chapter 3 now. Yep. Chapter 3, lesson 2. I'll put it in the chat if you're having a hard time loading this stuff, so you can at least see the key concepts there. Alright, so I said we were going to watch an Amoeba Sisters video. So in your Google Doc, you actually have a spot where you're going to, in this yellow box, where you're going to write down some notes, take any notes that you can while we watch this video. I know that the Amoeba Sisters talk pretty fast, but we'll share some different things that we get from the video. And if you want to put those in that spot where you take notes. Alright, so get ready in that little yellow box on your Google Doc to take some notes for this Amoeba Sisters video. Give me 1 second, my computer's loading in just a little slow.
Would you like to know one of the most underappreciated pieces of cytoplasm out there? Platelets. We take for granted the function of our platelets, which are fragments of cytoplasm that help stop us from bleeding. They help our blood clot when we get hurt. But there is a disorder called hemophilia that can affect those platelets because special clotting factor proteins that are needed to work with the platelets may not work correctly. So even a basic cut could be dangerous for people with hemophilia because they could bleed continuously. We have many treatments for the symptoms of hemophilia, and this has greatly improved outcomes with this disorder, although it wasn't always that way. Hemophilia is a sex-linked recessive trait, which means it's different from the basic Mendelian genetic problems. What do I mean by that? Well, we still use the terms dominant and recessive for alleles, but this time, because it's sex-linked, the alleles are on sex chromosomes. This is the case with sex-linked traits. So what is a sex chromosome? Well, recall that humans have 46 chromosomes. Chromosomes are made up of DNA and protein, and they contain your genes. Well, 2 of your 46 chromosomes, they are called the sex chromosomes. In a karyotype, it is usually the last 2 chromosomes that are the sex chromosomes. The sex chromosomes are X and Y chromosomes. but it has nothing to do with the shape of the chromosome. That's always kind of confusing, but please don't think that Y chromosomes are shaped like a Y and X chromosomes are shaped like an X. This used to always confuse me. It has nothing to do with their name. The reason they got their name is actually kind of interesting, so to the Google for that. Everyone has an X chromosome. But if you have another X chromosome, meaning you have two X chromosomes, you are female. And if you have a Y chromosome, meaning you have an X and a Y chromosome, you are male. There are also genetic disorders where you can have extra copies of sex chromosomes, but we will not go into that in this clip. Sex-linked traits are traits that are specifically on the sex chromosomes. Most sex-linked traits tend to be on the X chromosome because it is larger than the Y chromosome and it contains more genes in the Y chromosome. The disorder hemophilia is like this. Now we will use the letter capital H to represent an allele for having normal blood clotting function, and a letter lowercase h to represent an allele for having hemophilia. Hemophilia is a sex-linked recessive disorder, which is why it's being represented by a lowercase letter h. Only it must be placed on the sex chromosome as a superscript, like an exponent. A woman that does not have hemophilia could have the genotype X big H, X big H, or X big H, X little h. Because as long as she's got at least one dominant allele, that dominating allele will be what shows. So no hemophilia, since again, hemophilia is a recessive sex-linked disorder. The only way for her to have hemophilia would be the genotype X little h, because only when there is no dominant present will that recessive show up, at least in this type of trait. Now, for a male to not have hemophilia, his genotype would have to be X big H, Y. Notice how I did not put anything on the Y chromosome. Again, most sex-linked traits are on the X chromosome. If he has the genotype X little h, Y, then he has hemophilia. He doesn't have two X chromosomes, so he cannot be a carrier. So let's say that two people that do not have hemophilia have children. However, let's say that the woman is a carrier. That means she is heterozygous. How do you do a sex-linked Punnett square cross for this kind of trait? Step 1, identify the genotypes of the parents. So the mother was a carrier. She is X big H, X little h. She does not have hemophilia because of that dominant allele present, but she is a carrier. The male, if he does not have hemophilia, well, he must be X big H, Y. There's no other option for him. Step 2, place one parent on the top, outside of the square like this, and place the other parent on the left, outside of the square like this. Step 3, cross them. For formatting purposes, place X chromosomes before Y, and you also write any sex chromosomes with dominant letters first. The results you get in the squares would be the offspring, the babies. The genotype ratio could be written out like this. The phenotype ratio, remember that these are the observable traits, can be written out that there is a 75% chance that the child will be born without hemophilia and a 25% chance that a child would have hemophilia for this boy here. You could also make this a ratio, so 3-to-1. Notice that in this type of example of a sex-linked recessive disorder, males are more likely to inherit this disorder because there is only one X chromosome present. This is true for many other sex-linked recessive disorders, such as colorblindness. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Alright, y'all, so that was just a little bit more about some Punnett squares. So hopefully we're going to look at some Punnett squares here in the next coming weeks. I think we're going to try to put together just a small little project as science teachers are to give you guys at the end of this unit. Alright, so I know this is the same question, how do organisms get their genes? But what I want to do with this slide is I want to ask what new information, or what information did you get from that video that could possibly help us with this question?
I tried taking as many notes as I could, but it went so fast.
I know, the Amoeba Sisters go super fast. That's the only downfall of them, but they give you a lot of good information.
Like, for the first thing, I wrote, like, because I couldn't figure out how to spell it, so I just wrote, like,
that's not a big deal, because that has more to do with hemophilia and not as much to do with, like, when we're talking about Punnett squares or something is dominant or recessive. All right, so from that video, what do we learn a little bit more about with Punnett squares, or with something being dominant or something being recessive?
If the only thing I had on like that, I took the wrong note. When no dominant, that's when the recessive shows up for girls.
Okay.
I think I was very confused. It went very fast. Actually, I take notes and missed a bunch of stuff.
That's okay. Hemophilia is a little bit different because it is a sex-linked chromosome. It's on the sex-linked chromosome. So it's a sex-linked gene. So it's a little different than other ones, but I thought that was a good video because we had talked about hemophilia before. And I just wanted you guys to see a little bit more about it. So we are going to be doing something kind of with Punnett squares today, but not exactly like we saw in the video. All right, so we're not going to be, we'll try to use some words like dominant and recessive today. So just pay attention to those kind of things when we are filling in these tables for this next activity, which is our sim. All right. So for the sim, we're going to investigate how organisms get their genes by mating to spiders and recording data on the parents and their offspring. So the previous lesson, we actually started to mate the spiders. So we would drag one spider over to another, and then we would create reproductive cells and then eventually randomly fertilize. So remember, we are investigating how organisms get their genes so we can explain why traits for cell flexibility vary within the spider family. So we're going to be able to hopefully get rid of claim 2 today, right? So people often think that an offspring looks more like one parent because that offspring received more genes from one parent over the other. Right? So we're going to use the sim to examine how offspring inherit genes through the process of reproduction to help us support or refute claim 2. All right, so I'm going to go over an example first, and then I'm going to have you guys do another feature, or look at another feature with Otis and Ann. So we are going to mate Otis and Ann today, and we're going to observe their genes and determine if offspring can inherit more genes from one parent. Right? So I have the sim pulled up. In your Google Doc, you have a link right under the activity. The link should be on the word simulation.
I have a question.
What?
Wait, so like how could like you inherit a gene, like more genes? You get 23 from each parent regardless. I'm confused.
I know you don't get confused, Katie, because you're on the right track. This claim is just trying to lead you away from that point, but stick with your point. Because I'm not going to tell you if you're right or wrong right now, but we will at the end of this lesson.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
No, don't get confused. Stick with what you know. You know that you get 23, and 46 total. Just stick with that right now. So don't get confused with what I'm doing. All right, so we're going to mate Otis and Ann. So you just drag Otis over to Ann or drag Ann to Otis. Create reproductive cells. You'll see sperm cells, egg cells, and then we will randomly fertilize. You guys will get probably a totally different set of offspring. I think mine will be, mine are different than last class. And so what I'm going to be looking at is stripe color. Today you guys are going to be doing body color, but I want to show you stripe color because there is something a little different that I want you to see. Okay, so if we look at Otis and Anne, I think I have this zoomed in enough to where you can see the trait and you can see their gene version, right? Remember that gene version is highlighted in black and the letters and numbers are in yellow. And so when I am up here in this table, so this is the table you guys are going to fill out on your Google Doc. I'm just going to do a different feature than you guys are right now, and then let you guys have time to do body color. All right, so Otis, his gene version is what? What is Otis's gene version? Yep, so T2, T2, and his trait is obviously blue. All right, so that is what I will put here. And then if I look at Anne, hers is T1, T3 with the black trait. And you guys will be doing this with body color. Now, when you're down here in this next table, when it says gene version and then it says Otis, you're going to go in and look at your spider 1. Look at their gene version. Where did they get that T2 from?
Otis.
Yeah, they got it from Otis because Otis is obviously the only one that has T2, right? So they got T2 from Otis, and then obviously their other one is T1, and they got that from Anne. And so that's what you're filling out here. This is kind of, I guess it's almost a backwards version of a Punnett square. So their gene version is T2, T1. And they should.
Oh wait, never mind.
Because if you look at the rest of these offsprings. Alright, so they got T2 from Otis and T1 from Anne. Okay, and so then their body color trait is purple. Now, you're going to do this for the rest of these spiders as well. So if I go down here to spider 2, they got T2 from Otis, and they got T3 from Anne, and their trait is black. So they got T2 from Otis, T3, that's what it was, from Anne, so it's T2, T3, and their body color or body stripe is black. And so you guys are going to do that for the body color feature. So in this case, you guys would be looking at this feature and not the stripe color. Okay, what's your question?
So, where did you get 2 things from there?
I'm not sure how you would.
Like, cause like one of the spiders, like Otis is C1, C3, and then 2 of them are C1, C3.
Okay.
So do I just use C1 from Otis and C3 from Anne?
So if you go back and you look at this, watch what happens when I press randomly fertilize. Did you see what kind of happened with the egg cells and the sperm cells kind of coming together?
Yeah. It goes, I don't know why I asked. I had to think about that, sorry.
No, you're good. I wish that this would still, like they would show this right here. Like it would pause and show this as well as the spiders. You should be able to actually go in here. Dang. I thought that you'd be able, if you guys need help with this and you're wondering where they got their gene version from, you can always go back and look at this page here. I do really wish it would pause right here though. So now mine are completely different because I randomly fertilized. Alright, so Brandon, when I'm talking about gene version from Otis, gene version Ann, I'm talking about what gene they got from which parent. So if I'm looking at Otis and Ann, right here I'm going to look at stripe color just because that's what I was looking at first. If I'm looking at Otis, the only thing that they can receive from Otis is T2, obviously, because his is T2 for stripe color, and they can receive a T1 or a T3 from Ann. So in this case, for Spider 1, they received a T2 from Otis and a T1 from Ann. When you're looking at this right now, that first T and the number, in your case, you're looking at body color, so you're looking at the C and the number. That first C and the number should come from Otis. The other should come from Ann. So I'll leave this up to help you. And then I'm going to put a timer on this other side. And it's only going to be about 4 minutes because I don't think you guys need too much time with that table. Yeah, everybody's is going to be different. Just because it randomly fertilizes. Mine was different when I went back and forth. I know, I hate when that siren goes off. I always, if I miss it, I hate when I do that. All right, guys. All right, so you should have finished the sim and that chart in your Google Doc. Make sure you finish that up. That's the last thing that you guys are going to do in that Google Doc. If you want to hand that in, you can. Just make sure you're following along on these next slides, and we'll be done here in just a few. All right, so I have 3 questions before we move on real quick. So are the offspring's traits the same, or are they different from the parent's traits? Are they the same, or are they different from the parent's traits? So y'all can answer that in the chat. Right? So Katie, Alfred, Emerson, you guys are saying that they are the same. So I'm looking at body color right now. This is what you guys were looking at. So all of these, all of mine right here are C3, C3. So all of them, their body color looks like Anne. But if I go over to their stripe color, this is where it gets a little different, right? Because they get T2 from Otis and they can get a T1 from Anne. And they can be purple and not blue or black, their stripe color. So in this case, they don't look like their parents, right? If you look at another one, it might be different as well, but I like to look at stripe color just because you can actually see that stripe color. All right, so in this case, you can see that spider 1 and 2 on mine are purple, and neither of their parents are purple, right? So that one kind of comes back to the next question. Do any of the offsprings have a gene version that is not present in either parent? And that's not the case for body color, but that is the case for stripe color, right? All of the gene versions that you guys saw for body color, all of those you can find in either of these parents. All right, last question here. For each offspring, where do the copies of each gene come from? For each offspring, where do those copies of each gene come from? Yeah. Right, they come from the parent. And somebody tell me how many comes from each parent in this case. Yeah, 1 from each. So you guys are right. You don't have to put a question mark there, but you get 1 from each. So you don't get all of Otis's gene version down here, right? You see C3, C3. You get the C3, 1 of the C3s from Otis and 1 of the C3s from Anne. All right. This is where I was telling you guys earlier. I wish that it would pause here because I think that is a really good representation and it shows you guys right here really well on what's going on. You can see the purple and you can see the green sperm cells and egg cells kind of coming together and where you're getting each of those from. And so you're getting 1 from each in that case. All right. So for our last little activity, we're going to come back to our claim 2, right? So claim 2 is saying the offspring's traits depend on which parent the offspring inherited more copies of genes from. Are you guys still disagreeing with this claim, or does anybody agree? All right, go ahead and put it in the chat. Let's all get on the same page. All right, I'm seeing disagree. I still disagree. All right, what about everybody else? Got 4 people responding. Make sure you're responding in the chat whether you still disagree or you agree with claim 2. If we can get on a consistent. I can't even say it right. I can spell it. All right. Everybody's disagreeing, so what I'm going to go with is we are going to scratch off claim 2, and we don't have to worry about claim 2, just claim 1 and claim 3 from now on. And it'll be easier for you guys when you are writing about it next week. All right, so for our key concept, we're going to say that each parent randomly passes on one of its 2 copies of each gene to its offspring. And so that's why Katie was saying that we get 23 from our mom, 23 from our dad, total of 46 chromosomes. That's what she was saying at the beginning of class. And so we get 1 from each parent. Right, so everybody has 46 chromosomes, but you get half from your mom, half from your dad. Right, each offspring therefore receives 2 copies of each gene, 1 from each parent. Make sure you get this key concept down in your notebook. I was telling my last class reminding them about their digital notebook. If you guys are completing that digital notebook and staying up to date on it, I'm going to be taking either some extra credit points or some kind of grade for your notebook. So the more you have been filling out, the more you've been keeping track of that, the more points you will get for that digital notebook.
Can you copy and paste the key concept in the chat?
Yeah, let me see. I know it's a pretty long one.
That goes in the bottom part of the important ideas for Shanks 3 lesson 1, right?
Yep. Emerson asked a good question. I'm going to say it to the whole class. Are you guys supposed to answer the chapter questions in the notebook? That is for you guys. The more you use that, I think the more you will get out of. Whoops, I meant to send that to everybody and not just you, Emerson. But the more you guys use that digital notebook, I think the better. So if you want to answer that chapter question, you can. That is not something that I'll be looking at as much as I'll be looking at the things that you should have been copying down in class. All right, I put that key concept in the chat. All right, so I'm going to leave this on here for you guys. The only thing that you guys have left is your exit slip for lesson 3.2. It is already on Canvas. You guys don't have any homework other than that exit slip. So get that Google Doc in and just make sure you turn that in on Canvas and do your exit slip. And that is all that I have for you guys today. If you guys have any questions, let me know. If not, I will see you all on Thursday.